This Explain Everything is an attempt to explain how to memorize the overall concept map or flow chart for the homeostatic response to hyperosmotic dehydration. I'm not going into any of the theory behind all this. It's just really just a way to try to memorize the chart. So start off by looking at the control centers, and in this particular response we have 4 of them. They are the cardiovascular control center, the JG cells, the hypothalamus, and adrenal cortex. So I would start off by just writing those 4 diamonds and labeling them. And then on the next slide, we'll slowly progress through the process. Now we're going to start adding arrows. So let's first of all just look at the input to the various components from the receptors. Now remembering that there's various types of receptors, osmoreceptors, baroreceptors, stretch receptors. So we're not going to concern ourselves with the details right now. Just look at the fact that for each one of these control centers, there's going to be input via the receptor. So there's input coming into the cardiovascular control center, there's input coming into the JG cells, there is going to be an influence on the GFR, and the hypothalamus actually has 1, 2, 3 different types of receptors sending afferent signals to the control center. So again, just practice doing that, get that under control, and then move on to the next slide. Now let's add some additional input into these various components. The cardiovascular control center has another input, remembering that the cardiovascular control center has 2 inputs. JG cells have 3, so let's add another one here, and then just connect the GFR with the JG cells to complete the 3 inputs into the JG cells. And the GFR has 1 more coming in here, so the GFR has 2. Hypothalamus, we've already noted, has 3. So cardiovascular control center 2, JG 3, GFR 2, hypothalamus 3. Now let's look at outputs. Cardiovascular control center 2 in and 2 out. The other one here going to the parasympathetic nervous system, which I just didn't bother writing down. The JG cells are putting a dashed line here. The whole RAAS system going from the JG cells to angiotensin II to the adrenal cortex and then aldosterone. So that whole system is the RAAS system. And the GFR is going to just have 1 output, one response to conserve water. Hypothalamus has 2. So cardiovascular control center 2, JG cells 1, GFR 1, and hypothalamus 2. Now let's look at the output from the sympathetic nervous system, and remembering it has 4. So it is going to go to the heart, to the arterioles, to the JG cells, so it's connecting up with that there, and it is also going to be the other input going into the GFR, like that. So sympathetic, 4 outputs. And now we have to look at angiotensin II, remembering it does 5 things. So it has 5 outputs. Okay, first of all, it's going to go to the arterioles. It is also going to go and hook up there with the cardiovascular control center. It is, as already discussed, going to the adrenal cortex as part of the RAAS system. And it is going to do everything that the hypothalamus does. So it is also going to stimulate ADH and stimulate thirst. So angiotensin, 5 outputs. So now I'm going to try to do the whole thing in one take here. So let's see how I do. So start by the receptors coming in. Receptor input into the various components. So we have 1 coming into cardiovascular control center, 1 into the JG, 1 into the GFR, and 3 into the hypothalamus. Looking at additional input, we also have another one coming into the cardiovascular control center. Remember, 2 into the cardiovascular control center. We have another 2 coming in to the JG cells, and that is pretty well it for that. Now what we're going to do is look at the outputs. So we're going to discuss the fact that the cardiovascular control center has 2, so it's going to be going to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The JG cells are going to be going through a little dotted line going to angiotensin II via the RAAS system, and the GFR is also going to be going out, having an effect on volume, and the hypothalamus has 2. I just realized that I forgot one other input, and that was to the GFR. Okay, so now that we've got that, now we can concentrate on the sympathetic nervous system. So we looked at the fact that the sympathetic has 4, so we are going to start hooking up things here now. So the sympathetic hooks up to the JG cells, it goes to the heart, it goes to the arterioles, and then crossing over, it is going to link up with the GFR. The final component here is angiotensin II, remembering it does 5 things, so we're going to go up here and hook up there to the cardiovascular control center, go to the arterioles, go to the adrenal cortex, does everything that the hypothalamus, so we're going to go to ADH, and we're going to go to thirst. And we can just link up that little final component there. Remembering that the effects of ADH are going to be, the effects of angiotensin II, there's 5 of them, but only one of them is going to be blocked, and that is the effect on the adrenal cortex. So this whole process here is blocked under conditions of hyperosmotic dehydration, and what's blocking it is the increase in osmolarity. I just want to make one correction here. As previously stated, the arrows coming in here I said were from receptors. Okay, that actually is not true. I lied. These are, hypothalamus is coming from 3 different types of receptors. Cardiovascular control center is. These two, the JG cells and the GFR, are being affected directly by the decrease of blood volume and blood pressure. Okay, so the JG input and the GFR input is not via receptors, it's via the decrease directly. Okay, I'm having so much fun doing this. I'm going to see if I could do it again really quickly here now. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things coming in. Remembering these 2 are direct, hypothalamus and cardiovascular control center via receptors. Then we go to additional input. So we have another input coming into the cardiovascular control center. We have 2 more inputs coming into the JG cells. Don't forget about that other one coming into the GFR. Then we can start looking at output now. And looking at that, we have, I'm trying to find my color. I've lost my color. There it is. Okay, so going out, we have sympathetic. Okay, also parasympathetic. So we have 2 outputs from the cardiovascular control center. And we have the JG cell doing the little dashed line to angiotensin. GFR is just doing its thing, conserving blood volume. And ADH and thirst for the hypothalamus. Angiotensin 2 we'll look at, and sympathetic we'll look at in a second. So, seconds up. Sympathetic goes to the heart, goes to the arterioles, hooks up with the JG, and hooks up with the GFR. Now we're going to go to angiotensin 2, and it hooks up with the cardiovascular control center, with the arterioles, with the adrenal cortex, with the ADH, and with thirst, and then just putting that little arrow there, remembering that this whole thing here is inhibited due to the increase in osmolarity. Gee, this is almost fun. Maybe I'll do it one more time. Okay, I am going to do it again, but I'm not going to talk. Just watch this. Ta-da!